The camera was still rolling when Steve Harvey walked away from the podium. Not to the commercial break mark. Not to the side stage where the producers wait. He walked to the back wall of the set, pressed both palms flat against it, and stood there for 11 seconds while the audience of 300 people held their breath so completely that you could hear the hum of the studio lights above the stage. That was the moment the lead producer reached for her headset and said the 4 words nobody who works in television ever wants to say mid-episode. "We may need to cut." What happened before that? The answer that broke Steve Harvey in front of 30 million viewers began not in a television studio in Atlanta, but in a single-wide trailer outside Macon, Georgia, on a Tuesday morning in February of 2019, when a woman named Dorothy Mae Tillman sat down at her kitchen table and tried to figure out how to tell her family that the lights were about to go off for the 3rd time that winter. Dorothy was 61 years old. She had raised 4 children in that trailer on a combination of cleaning jobs, prayer, and a stubbornness that her late husband Raymond used to say could stop a freight train. Raymond had died of a stroke in 2014, and in the 5 years since, Dorothy had reorganized her entire life around one purpose: making sure her youngest daughter, Keisha, finished college. Keisha was 22. She was 3 semesters from a degree in nursing at Middle Georgia State. She was the first person in their family in 4 generations who had made it that far. The electric bill was $412. Dorothy had $87 in her account. She did not tell Keisha. She told her she had handled it. She told her oldest son Marcus, who called from Atlanta asking if she needed anything, that she was fine, just tired. She told her neighbor Gloria, who had noticed that Dorothy was not running her space heater anymore, even on the coldest nights, that the heater was acting up and she was waiting on a part. What she did not tell anyone was that she had stopped eating 2 full meals a day, so the money she saved could go toward Keisha's textbooks. She ate 1 meal, usually rice and whatever canned vegetable was cheapest, and she drank coffee in the morning and water for the rest of the day. And she told herself this was temporary, that it would pass, that God had seen her through worse and would see her through this. She had been doing this for 7 months. Her body was changing in ways she could not hide from herself. She had lost 23 pounds. Her hands shook in the morning until she had her first coffee. She had a persistent cough that she told herself was from the winter air. Her neighbor Gloria had started leaving extra groceries on her porch without explanation. A dozen eggs here, a bag of apples there, and Dorothy always put them inside quickly, as if shame were something that could be outrun before the neighbors saw it. Her granddaughter Amara, who was 7, had come to stay with her for a weekend in January. On the 2nd morning, Amara had walked into the kitchen while Dorothy was standing at the counter with her coffee, and the little girl had looked at her grandmother with the unfiltered honesty that only small children carry, and said, "Grandma, why do your arms look like that?" Dorothy had laughed and said she had been working hard, and she distracted Amara with cartoons, and when she was certain the child wasn't watching, she had gone to the bathroom and looked at her own arms in the mirror for a long time. The system that had failed Dorothy was not one system. It was several, colliding. Raymond's pension from the county maintenance job had a survivor benefit clause that had been misfiled at his death, and the 17 months of legal effort to correct it had cost Dorothy $600 in notary and filing fees, and had ultimately produced a monthly check of $209, not the $640 she was owed. The cleaning company she worked for had reclassified its workers as independent contractors in 2017, which meant she no longer qualified for the state health assistance program she had relied on, and the federal food assistance she had applied for after Raymond's death had been approved, then suspended, after an administrative error flagged her account for a duplicate submission that had never occurred. The appeal was still pending. It had been pending for 14 months. None of this was her fault. Every door had a form. Every form had a wait time. Every wait time had a reason it had expired. She kept going. She cleaned houses on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She prayed on her knees every night beside the bed she and Raymond had shared for 31 years. She told herself Keisha would graduate in May, and that once Keisha was working as a nurse, everything would right itself. She just had to hold on until May. Then, in the spring of 2019, her church's family outreach coordinator submitted Dorothy's family to appear on Family Feud. Dorothy didn't ask to go. She didn't fill out the form. The coordinator had done it quietly because she knew Dorothy would have refused. Dorothy did not want charity, did not want attention, did not want anyone looking at her life from the outside. But Keisha had called her mother crying with excitement on a Wednesday afternoon, and Dorothy did not have it in her to say no to that voice. So, on September 14, 2019, Dorothy Mae Tillman stood under the lights of the Family Feud stage in Atlanta, with Keisha beside her and two of her grandchildren just off stage, in a green room, eating the best catering they had ever seen in their lives. And she smiled the smile she had been practicing for 40 years, the one that said everything was fine. And she played the game. The Tillman family did well. They were in second place going into the final round. The game was close. The audience was loud and warm. And then Steve Harvey, moving through the questions with his usual ease, asked the question that no producer had flagged as unusual, that no writer had written with any intention other than to get laughs. He asked, "Name something a person gives up when times get really hard." The first contestant on the other family answered immediately, "Vacations." The board lit up. Number 2 answer. Steve moved down the line. "Eating out." Correct. "Cable TV." On the board. He came to Dorothy. She looked at the board. She looked at Steve Harvey. And something in her, some latch that had been held shut for 7 months, some door that exhaustion and the lights and the sheer accumulated weight of what she had been quietly enduring had finally worn down, opened. She said, "Meals. Not eating out, not restaurants. Meals." The audience heard the word the way she said it. Steve Harvey heard the word the way she said it. The studio fell completely silent. Steve looked at her. He had hosted this show for over a decade. He had heard 10,000 answers. He knew the difference between someone playing a game and someone telling the truth inside a game. He stepped closer to her. His voice dropped, not for effect, not because a producer had told him to, but because some things deserve a smaller space. "Meals," he said softly. "You mean actual meals? Food?" Dorothy nodded once. The studio fell completely silent again. And then, in what a senior camera operator who had worked the show for 11 years would later call the most extraordinary 3 minutes in the show's 45-year history, Dorothy Tillman began to talk. Not because a producer prompted her, not because Steve pushed her, but because the kindness in his voice had done what 7 months of survival had not. It had made her feel, for the first moment since Raymond died, that someone was strong enough to hold what she had been carrying alone. She told him about the meals. She told him about the electric bill. She told him about the cough and the shaking hands and the groceries on the porch that she never let herself keep more than a few days because accepting them fully felt like giving up. She told him, with Keisha standing 3 feet away, hearing all of this for the first time, that she had been doing it for Keisha, that she would do it again without a second thought, that she was not sad about it, she was just tired, that she had been so very tired for such a long time. Keisha made a sound that wasn't a word. She grabbed her mother's arm with both hands. The studio fell completely silent. 300 people in the audience were not making a single sound. At least 4 crew members had stepped back from their equipment. A camera operator near the left stage had turned her face away for a moment. The other competing family, the Warrens from Decatur, stood frozen at their podium, and one of them, the youngest son, had pressed his hand over his mouth. Steve Harvey did not speak for 11 full seconds. That pause was what the producers saw through the monitor. That was when she reached for her headset. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the audience. He looked at the cameras. He said, hold on a minute." And then he did something he had done only twice in over a decade of hosting. He walked away from the game entirely. He walked to the edge of the stage, and he stopped. And he stood with his back to the podium for 11 seconds, palms flat on the back wall, and no one said a word. When he turned around, his eyes were red. He was not performing. He was not building to a moment. He was a man who had grown up knowing exactly what it felt like to run out of food before you ran out of month. And he was standing in front of someone who had been living that truth quietly for 7 months, while smiling for her daughter. He walked back to Dorothy. He took both her hands in his, and he said, and these 5 words landed in that studio like something dropped from a great height, "You are not alone here." The studio fell completely silent, and then 300 people began to cry. But Steve wasn't done. He told Dorothy that the show was going to cover her electric bill. Not from the winnings, from the show. He called the executive producer by name. He said it on camera. He said, "We are not moving past this." He asked the audience if they agreed, and the sound in that building was not applause. It was something older than applause. It was 300 people saying yes with every part of themselves they had. Then he turned to the camera. He looked directly into it, and he said, "I want to talk to everyone watching at home. There is somebody in your life right now who is answering fine when they are not fine. And I need you to ask again. Not once. Again. Because some people have been holding on so long by themselves that they have forgotten that holding on together was always an option." The crew did not move. The other family did not move. Then Marcus Warren, the youngest son from the competing family, the one who had pressed his hand over his mouth, stepped away from his podium. He crossed the stage without asking permission, without a producer's signal, without any cue at all. He walked to Dorothy Tillman, and he put his hand out and he said, "Ma'am, my family would like to forfeit our winnings today. We'd like them to go to yours." The studio fell completely silent for the last time, and then it was not silent at all. But Steve wasn't done with Dorothy. After the cameras stopped, he sat with her and Keisha backstage for 37 minutes. He called 2 people from his phone. He made arrangements that would not become public for weeks. He did not announce what he did. He did not post about it. The crew found out the way crews always find out, through the stage manager who had been in the room, who couldn't keep it in past Thursday. The episode aired 6 weeks later, on October 31st, 2019. The producers had debated 3 edits. They had considered cutting the entire exchange. Not because it was inappropriate, but because they weren't sure television was the right vessel for something that real. In the end, they aired every second of it, every 11-second pause, every word Dorothy said, every moment of that silent studio. The clip was shared 4 million times in the first 48 hours. It trended in 11 countries. The comments section, which on the internet is usually where Grace goes to die, was, for 72 hours, nothing but people writing about their own mothers. their own grandmothers, the meal they had skipped, the thing they had hidden, the person they were going to call. 3 months later, Keisha Tillman graduated from Middle Georgia State University with a degree in nursing. Dorothy was in the front row of the ceremony in a dress she had bought new for the first time in 4 years. A photographer caught the moment Keisha crossed the stage and looked at her mother, and the image circulated again, quietly, the way the true things always do. A year after the episode aired, the production company had partnered with 3 food security nonprofits to launch the Family Table Fund, seeded with a portion of advertising revenue from the episode's re-airings. The fund had, by that point, provided direct grocery assistance to 11,000 families across 14 states. Today, Dorothy Mae Tillman lives in a house, not a trailer. Keisha bought it. She is a licensed registered nurse at a hospital in Macon. She works the overnight shift 3 times a week and calls her mother every single morning before she sleeps. Dorothy's electric bill is paid. Her hands do not shake. Her cough is gone. She still prays on her knees beside the bed every night. Some things you hold on to not because you have to, but because they held you first. The game show producer who reached for her headset that afternoon, the one who said, "We may need to cut," has since said in interviews that it was the only time in her 20-year career she was glad she put the headset back down and let the cameras keep rolling. Because this is what actually happened. A woman stood under the brightest lights in the world and told the truth about eating 1 meal a day so her daughter could have a future. And a man who had once known hunger heard it in the one word she chose. And everything after that was just what happens when one person refuses to let another person carry something alone. That is the only story. It has always been the only story. If this moved you, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss a story like Dorothy's. And drop a comment below. Tell us one word that describes the person in your life who carries everything quietly. Just one word. We read every single one.